Well, it's been a while. We had a bit of a hiatus, but we're back with Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures, and we're here for our great sponsor, John McEncrow and the crew. Kiss Professional Solutions, 1300 547 777. They're the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria, with a large or small business in Melbourne, Sydney, Gippsland, Shepparton and Albury. They offer business phone systems, NBN services, CCTV and security systems. They're based in Carrum Downs in southeast Melbourne. My guest today, I've been lucky enough to know for more than 30 years, which indicates, with the greatest respect to the great man, that we're getting on a little bit in years. Was an excellent footballer, and I don't think he gives himself credit for that. I think a lot of people should give him more credit. 121 games at the Port Adelaide Magpies. He was vice captain virtually as a kid at that club, and then went across to Geelong and played 50 games for the Cats. He has then embarked on a magnificent media career as a football broadcaster. He also worked at the ABC calling hockey at the Olympic Games, plenty of basketball, plenty of cricket. He was at AW, then at SEN and at Fox Footy and Channel 9, and one of the great footy broadcasters who's got some of the greatest lines, one in particular, which I think is the best line I've ever heard. We'll get to a little bit later. But writing has always been a passion for this man, and he's written a novel, and the novel is called Killing for Sport. My guest today, Dwayne Russell. Dwayne, great to have you with us.
Dan, nice to be chatting with you again. It's been a while, so it was good to get your call.
Thanks very much, Dwayne. Well, firstly, before we get underway, when you broadcast, I've never seen anyone fuel himself up like Dwayne Russell. When I first met you, you were sculling litres of milk, and I thought, we've got a different character here.
Yeah.
What have you got in front of you today? Have you got your
I haven't actually. I've come in cold today. I've had my 3 coffees, so I'm ready to go. I'll just I'll probably launch into a can of Coke a little bit later on. But it's my time off, Dan. I'm trying to look after myself and probably eat a little healthier. And now that I'm not going to do a broadcast this afternoon, just maybe keep my heart rate down to, if I can keep it down to 65 beats a minute, maybe for a whole day, see how I go with just a low heart rate as opposed to my 160 beats a minute broadcast rate. So not an overload of sugar when I'm not working, which is probably better for me.
I was always worried when I heard what you were having. Well, the milk's okay, but you know, the Red Bulls and the Cokes and the blocks of chocolate, I was always worried about your guts at the end of a broadcast, because you were doing that every single time you were broadcasting, and you'd call, 3 games a weekend, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but the rest of the week I'm pretty disciplined. I'm a eater of sashimi and not a lot of carbs during the week and not a lot of sugar during the week. So I exercise quite a bit during the week. So I do try and look after myself, knowing that the big load's going to come on the weekend. But look, I probably will have some issues down the track. Who knows? I'll try and be a bit more disciplined this coming season if I can get my heart rate up to 160 and not load in so much sugar and family blocks of Caramello and Red Bull.
Yes.
I'll see how we go. But there's always that game that needs an extra can of Coke at 3/4 time.
It certainly does. Now, you've written this great book. I've read it, loved it. Killing for Sport. Why write a book?
Well, it's always been a passion of mine to write a fiction novel. It's part of my brain that I use for broadcasting anyway. I mean, when I broadcast sport, I'm looking at something happening in front of me and I'm trying to put it into words, and that's exactly what I'm doing with the fictional stories in my head. I do a lot of traveling in the car and traveling on planes, and rather than waste the time, I do like to, concoct what might be the next fictional novel, or try and concoct what might be the next good paragraph or good chapter. And it's been a long time coming to get it to the stage that it's in bookshops like it is now. I mean, it's a long process. It took a long process to write it, and then it's a long process to get published as well. That's a hard thing. You got to go through the knockback program.
Yeah.
Get your novel in front of publishers for starters is hard. You've almost got to get yourself an agent to do that, and then it sits on a publisher's desk for as long as they let it sit there with the other 100 novels that have been placed on their desks to be read. And then when they get around to you, you hope it's good enough to get the tick. And, I think for most people, the first round at least is a round of knockbacks, which is exactly what happened to me. So then it got to the stage of Well, I was lucky enough as an ex-footballer. I'm used to feedback. I'm used to being told at quarter time what I'm not doing right, told at the end of the game what I'm not doing right. And if you don't ask those questions from the coach, then the coach won't pick you the next week. And I felt like that with the publishers as well. I felt like, well, the publishers have knocked me back. I expected that. But why have you knocked me back? Why aren't I getting a game with you? And they gave me some really good feedback, a few of them. Feedback to the point that, it was reasonably easy to fix in rewrites. I didn't think I was a great dialogue writer, and I was worried that I'd put too much dialogue in. So I took, a lot of the dialogue out, and a few of the publishers said, it needs more dialogue. So it was fairly easy for me to put the dialogue back in and take text out, let the dialogue explain more of the story and not have the text explain it. That was a fairly easy fix that I was really, excited to hear because I knew that I could adjust that. They wanted more depth of character, which was fun for me. I mean, they're my characters. I've created it anyway. I just didn't give some of them as much depth. In fact, I'd taken some of the depth out because I wanted to be a shorter read, but they asked for more depth of character. I'd given away too much of the plot too early, so I saved a few of those things for later on. So they liked my writing style and they liked the story. So in essence, I just had to get better at the way I had the story progress and the way I wrote, which was to me a really exciting year post getting those reviews from publishers to rewrite it all. It was, I'd already had 20 rewrites. It was just rewrite 21. So then took it back to publishers a year later, and a firm press. Kate Blake, there's an old story. You've got to find someone who believes in you as much as you believe in yourself. And
Correct.
that person at a firm press, and now it's on shelves for people to buy for Christmas or wherever they might be, looking for an escape, because it's not an Australian-based novel. It's a bit of an adventure, Paris, London, French Riviera, Monaco. So it's that kind of adventurous Australian written novel. It's not a novel that spends its time in Australia. So it takes people on an escape.
I'm writing my memoirs and I'm finding the same sort of situation in regard to getting a lot of knockbacks. And I mean, I took me a year to write my memoirs and I've got to go back and edit and whatever. So it is frustrating, isn't it? As you say, when you keep getting knockbacks. But I mean, you've achieved a lot in your career. So you've got a lot of self-confidence, Dwayne, haven't you?
I have. That's one thing I always have had. A lot of belief in myself. I thought I was going to be the greatest footballer of all time. That didn't happen. But I had a crack at it, but that was my belief. That was my want. As a kid. And there's an old Baz Luhrmann quote, the race is long, but in the end, it's only with yourself. And, I'm trying to find out how good I can be at various things, and I'm getting on in age, but I wanted to find out how good a writer I could be. And you got to be prepared to have people not like you or have knockbacks because, sometimes, as the Luhrmann quote goes, sometimes you're ahead in the race, sometimes you're behind in the race, but it is only with yourself. And I'm in a race to get the best out of myself as a writer. So it's, to be honest, frustrating is a word but I was more frustrated with myself early on. How can I want to be better. I want to be able to have it flow more. I read a lot of other books and other article writers that have written articles for, magazines like the New Yorker. There's a lot of stuff that I've read over time that, okay, well, that's why these people are getting their books published. That's why these people are getting their articles published in major newspapers. So, there is a lot out there you can learn. And as a sports person, if you want to fix your kicking, well, you go and watch Dunstall kick or go and watch Lockett kick. And that's, really what I did as a writer. I was able to understand, well, how do you get better? Okay, have a look at those that are great. And so that's something that I did in that process of the rewrites.
Who did you look at that you really rate as a writer?
Well, I read the Great Gatsby as a kid. I read the Great Gatsby again. I probably read it once a year, to be honest. Well, not all of it, but at least parts of it, because it actually puts me it gives me a writing tempo. F. Scott Fitzgerald it's an amazing novel that puts me back in that writing tempo. There's a few writers for the New Yorker as well, but I think the way that some of the articles are written that are, meant to be 10 or 15-minute reads is the way that I wanted to write my chapters. I wanted my chapters to be a story in itself, that you felt like you really had, a great adventure in that chapter, as opposed to, making a chapter not as enjoyable a story to try and get you to the next chapter. I wanted each chapter to be self-enclosed as a story, like reading an article in a major magazine that wants to keep you for 15 minutes. I mean, they want to keep you beyond the first line. And yeah, I think there's a bit of that in, the way that I've written as well. There's a bit of that magazine writer style in, I think, the way that I've written the chapters to be quick and punchy reads. I know you read it in a short period of time, Dan. I think it is one of those novels that you can sit down and read in 2 or 3 days. That's what I want it to be. I didn't want it to feel like it was hard to get through. I wanted to feel like it was an enjoyable read, took you on an adventure. It had a lot of plot twists in it, but the beauty of it was that, this adventure only needed to take 3 or 4 days to get through. If you want to take a couple of weeks, obviously you can do that. But, I'm getting the feedback now from a lot of people that have read it, and I'm really excited by, how much fun a read it was for a lot of people.
There's not a lot of nice characters. A couple in particular were nice. I'm not going to give the plot away, but was that always the aim, to make sure there were more unfriendly and I suppose characters that you're not going to like too much because of some of their extra, I suppose, curriculum activities?
Well, I tried to make it where I watch a lot of TV as well, watch a lot of movies.
Yeah.
You need heroes and villains. I think it's the sport needs heroes and villains, and I think a good thriller needs heroes and villains, and I think it needs someone for the reader to barrack for as well.
Yes.
I mean, you can't. I don't like watching movies or TV series where you're not barracking for someone. You don't really like anybody, and I think this novel gives people 2 or 3 people to barrack for. And I think also everyone's got flaws in life, and the characters in this novel I think have got flaws, but I think it's an interesting now process for me to listen to the people that have read it to find out who they've been barracking for in this, because even when I was writing it, I got late in the novel where I didn't know exactly who I wanted to win either of the 2 or 3 characters that can win. So I was working my way through that as well.
Do you think anyone has won yet, Dwayne? Because rumours are floating around. You've signed a contract for 3 books. I reckon there are so many open-ended aspects of this book, and I'm thinking when we got to the end of it,
Yeah.
is that it? There's so
No.
much more that could be explored, and you know that better than I do,
Yeah.
much more experienced writer.
Yeah.
I would hope that there might be a sequel to it.
Well, I think it's self-encapsulated to the point that if that's it, I think that is it. I like the resolution it's come to. I mean, there was 3 or 4 possible endings when I was writing it, and the one in the end that I went with was the one that my wife and my son thought was the better way. I think it is self-encapsulated. If that's the end, then that's the end. But I haven't signed a 3-book deal. What I have done is found a publisher who's willing to read more of my stuff and publish more of my stuff if it's good enough. And I don't think any publisher really wants a one and done author. Anyway, they play a lot of time and money into promoting an author, and a firm and Simon and Schuster, as part of that marriage, have done that with me. They've played a lot of time and energy into me, giving me their readers and their people who've read through this whole thing and done little bits and pieces of back and forth thought with me as to why don't I give this character more depth. That would be great, because the person from a firm that read this character thought that this character was so much fun to read about. Why not explore more? Give us 2 or 3 more chapters of their life. So there's been some people that have put their heart and soul into this at a firm as well. So, I think that there is that want to deliver something new to them in a year or two's time. So whether there's 2 or 3 in this line, of story with the same characters. Those that have lived, we'll see how we go.
Killing for sport. Now, I know how much you love your sport, being a sports broadcaster, making a living for it and out of it. There's a bit of sport, but there's not a lot of sport. Why'd you come up with that title?
So it's a play on the Shakespeare's King Lear line, "We are like flies to wanton boys, they kill us for their sport." And that what Shakespeare is writing about there is that the gods play with people for sport. And I think that's exactly what this novel is about. The gods play with Sarah. The gods play with Jackson. The gods decide, who in the world, whether you look at it in a fictional way or whether you look at it in an overall way. We do seem to have bits of luck that go with us and bits of luck that go against us, however that happens. And I think there is a lot of that in this novel as to the gods are messing with these people quite a lot. And, who does, people barrack for to have the gods have some good stuff happen to as this novel's unfolding, I think is a big part of it, a big part of the adventure. You read, it's a bit like watching sport, to be honest. I mean, you want the people that you love watching that play for your team, that are great for your team, you want them to have greatness. You want them to have luck. And I've sort of written that in novel form in this with quite a few of the characters. That's how the name came about, Killing for Sport. It's pretty much stolen from Shakespeare's King Lear.
Well, I don't think Shakespeare's going to worry too much. He's been gone a long time, Dwayne. Dwayne Russell, well-known sports broadcaster and author, with his book Killing for Sport, is my guest on the return of Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures. You can get it on all the various podcast, social media platforms. And KISS Professional Solutions are our sponsor, the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria, and their website, www.kissps.com.au. You're an excellent radio commentator in sport, football commentator in sport, but is writing your passion, Dwayne?
No, I still love going to the footy and broadcasting a game. It's still the thing that, I love the adrenaline rush of the day that unfolds in front of you and you have to get it right. There's still a beauty to that. I love it. And as a footballer, my whole life always revolved around how good I was on a Saturday. And I think that's still the case in the footy season. It's still, my whole life revolves around how good a job I do when I'm going to broadcast a game of footy. And I hope that continues on for a few more years, because the broadcasting part of me is still the big part now. But look, there'll be people, one day I'll get the tap on the shoulder and you're not good enough anymore, or there's someone new, or you're too old, or whatever. That'll happen. So hopefully writing is something I can do, long into my latter years. So that's the beauty of this as well. I mean, this is just the start. But there's a lot of people around the world who have had their first book published late in their life. So this has just opened up a new chapter for me. I hope that there's a movie for this one as well. I think that's something I'm pursuing at the moment with a number of people. So, that's going to be a big adventure, trying to get this into the hands of someone who believes that it's a good movie to make. So, that's a next adventure and a sideline to this that hopefully we'll be talking about in a year's time, Dan.
I hope so, Dwayne. I look forward to that. You'll be my first guest. Now, are you an expert in time management? Because I would have thought, I know you're one of life's great eccentrics. I've seen you at Dwayne's World do it when you're doing your exercise on the treadmill. I've seen you do your show magnificently in a spa. But you seem to do everything. You do Dwayne's World. You've obviously written a book. You've got your footy. You do a bit of basketball. There's not a lot of spare time for Dwayne Russell, is there?
Yeah, there's not, but I like being active, and I like having, whilst I'm able, some enjoyable things to achieve in my life. Now, the other thing that I do is I do knock back a lot of stuff as well. And I don't do a lot of evening speaking or lunch engagements, or there's a lot of those things that you can do as well. Sportsman's Nights. I am a believer that what you do, you've got to do at 100% and 100% to the best of your capacity. If you take on too much work, I think that you end up doing most of it at you can get down to 85%, and that's not what anybody wants. They want 100% of you. So there are a lot of things that I don't do. I don't do the basketball in the summer anymore, and that's a good time for me to recover, and just get my head emptied. So there's a lot of things I do say no to these days, but my core thing is that I do love broadcasting footy for Fox, and I do love broadcasting my show and some footy for SEN. And those are the two things that I want to give 100% to and make sure I get them right. And everything else can, take a third or fourth seat at the back.
Is right perfectionism? As most people would know, I've had some mental health issues and been in hospital, and they've said there is no such thing as perfectionism. Do you
Yeah.
agree with that or not?
All right. Well, you can aim for it, but you got to understand you're going to fail sometimes as well. So that's where, you got to try and achieve a level. And I try and do that with my broadcasting as well. And with my show, sometimes you get words wrong. Sometimes you don't give the moment as good as it deserved. But I think you do have to at least aim for a high level to be able to walk off air. And there is that feeling of walking off air at the end of a day's broadcast and saying, okay, well, I think we got that right. Yeah, we could have been better, maybe, but I think we went pretty close to getting a spot on. So that's the thing with all of us. I mean, whether you're a camera operator, could you have zoomed in a bit closer? If you're a director, could you have cut to that mark a little tighter? As a broadcaster, could I have given that more love or whatever? So there's all those little things. But at the end of the day, you do have to aim for a high level, I think.
As a broadcaster, we all prepare. We probably all over prepare. How does Dwayne Russell prepare? I believe you look at your games after you've called them to pick
Yep.
out things where you can improve, and you obviously watch games of teams you're about to see the next week. What else do you do?
Well, the main thing I try to do is watch 9 games a week. So that's the
Yeah.
hard part, trying to get. I mean, there's nothing better than having an understanding of what happened in every game when I'm on here on a Monday. The listeners that call up Dwayne's World, they expect me to have watched 9 games. I get a call. It's a national program, so I might get a Fremantle fan ringing from WA saying, "What about that free kick in the third quarter against Port Adelaide?" And if I haven't seen it, well, I can't have the discussion with them. So there's almost an expectation that I watch 9 games a week, which is hard to do. A lot of them, some of them I get to about Wednesday or the Thursday after. I do a lot of prep on the game call, and that normally starts for me at about a Wednesday or a Thursday. But the main thing for me is watching footy. I think that's the thing that I think is the core part of it. Is the more footy you watch, the more scenarios you see, the more understanding you have of a player's boot colour. So if you can't see his face or his jumper number, you know that he wears yellow boots because he's worn yellow boots all his life, or those kind of things. You get that ingrained in your mind, so it makes it easier to call if you've got an understanding of how many goals he kicked last week, what's the most goals he's ever kicked. Yeah, okay, I saw him kick 9 a couple of years ago, that kind of stuff. So it's just a matter of watching as much footy as possible as the best preparation pre, and then after. I do watch all the games back that I've done. And, if I say fantastic 3 times in a quarter, I don't know it unless I watch it back.
Correct.
And think, "Oh, I said that 3 times in the first quarter. What am I thinking?" So if you don't watch it back, you're your own best critic. You can get an understanding of, gee, I probably could have given that a bit more love, that goal, or given that mark a bit more love, or seen that player earlier. So, yeah, there's a lot to watching yourself back as well, I think.
Dwayne Russell's my guest, acclaimed sports broadcaster and author. He's written a great book called Killing for Sport. His first novel, it's a ripper, and he's here for Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures, my podcast. Great to have it back. 1300 547 is the phone number for our sponsor, KISS Professional Solutions. John McEncroe and the team based in Carrum Downs in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. Your puns. Are they prepared, or do they just come off
A lot
the
of
top
things
of the head?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that happen in my mind during the course of broadcasting, but I am a scenario trainer. I do think of, what if this guy kicks 7 today? What if this guy kicks the goal of the year? How would I explain it? So there's a lot of those things that get rolled around in my head, before games, and I'm watching them through the binoculars, go through their warm up, and I see something, and there's no kryptonite for Cripps tonight. He's
Yeah.
one of those examples. We were
Yeah.
just talking about him before the broadcast started. There was talking about him being Carlton Superman. And then I'm watching him warm up, and it just rolled into my mind. Cripps. Hope we see a lot of Cripps tonight, and straight away kryptonite was in my head. So, but you still needed to happen. So then he kicked that goal, and it enabled me to use that line. So it's not like I thought about it and wrote it down and had it on the chart to be used at some stage, in the next 2 weeks that I'll broadcast Carlton games. But the scenario just happened, and I've got it in my head. So that's part of my thought process. I'm a big listener to music as well. So, I just happen to be listening to a bit of music on the way to some games, and there's a line in a song that I might think, okay, well, I might throw that in if it's worthy. And strangely enough, last year there was a scenario that no one even I didn't even think about it at the time. It just came out, and at the end of it, I thought, oh, how stupid is that? Quoting Billie Eilish after a draw. That don't get smashed on Twitter and hammered on Instagram for that. But no one recognised the line. It was just in my mind. And, the draw happened, and the players had their arms up and their heads in their hands, and no one was celebrating. And I just happened to say it's not what they're made for. And happened to be I'd watched Barbie the night before, and I was listening to Billie Eilish. So, it's some of those stupid things just happen in my mind. And the moment happens, and it falls out my mouth.
Good movie, Barbie.
I thought it was better than Oppenheimer. Yeah, which won the Oscar. So
Really?
yeah,
Yeah.
I did. It was more of a fun, engaging. Oppenheimer, I thought, was too dialogue heavy, but that's just my opinion. I thought there was just too much dialogue, and it was too hard. I thought it was a more difficult watch, whereas Barbie was enjoyable. But I like my movies enjoyable. I
Yes.
don't like my movies too heavy and nasty, which is hopefully what my novel reflects as well. I mean, if people read it, I hope they have be taken on an enjoyable adventure. I don't want them, closing the book up and saying, well, that wasn't fun. I want it to be fun and enjoyable, and that there is a time where they might laugh and a time when they might cry. And at the end of my movies, I'm a bit like that as well. I like to have an enjoyable experience of the movies. Not that Oppenheimer wasn't unenjoyable. It's just that I thought Barbie was one of those things that, regardless of who you went with, you could have some fun with. So there's an answer to that question.
I'm a soft rock music fan from the 80s, REO, Speedwagon, Air Supply, Eagles. I'm a dag, Fleetwood Mac. What do you like to listen to? Obviously, you like Billie Eilish, who I've never
My
listened
son's
to
in
in
the
my
music
life.
industry. My son's in the music industry, so I
Yes,
watch
I
and
know that.
do a lot of stuff with him. It might be Radiohead head one day. It might be Van Morrison the next. I'm also sort of one of those people who likes to exercise with music on. So,
Yeah.
I might just do a whole hour of exercise to Moby because there's an upbeat. I might watch an old Led Zeppelin concert from the 80s. So there's a lot of those kind of old 80s bands and that I'm into, but that doesn't mean I don't like listening to a bit of newer music, because I was just talking about Billie Eilish before. So, yeah, if I was stuck on a desert island with one tape for my tape recorder, I'd probably take some Radiohead, I'd reckon.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, as I said, I'd probably take Fleetwood Mac or the Eagles, who I
Good choice.
absolutely love.
Good choice. I saw Fleetwood Mac when I was first time my parents had ever let me go out on my
Yeah.
own. Went with Craig Bradley to Memorial Drive. I think we were 14 or 15,
Right.
and we got and saw them at Memorial Drive. So it's going back a while now, but that was sensational. So that's a good choice. I'm also a big Fleetwood Mac fan.
Absolutely. Now, Dwayne, we talked before about some of your colourful lines, brown skids marks. Mother's Day was this year for Mother's Day. But there's one that stands out for me, which I think is the greatest line anyone's ever said. And we know Hutto's had some rippers over the years. 13, 13, 13. And I see it, but I don't believe it in regard to Nick Davis winning that game for Geelong. But the best line I've ever heard, and the Bulldogs again were getting smashed in a prelim final in 1998. And their runner, Chris
Wow.
Burton, was being sent out. And Dwayne Russell has said the runner's been sent out to go to Liberatore on the words of Mick Jagger. He said, "Hey, you, get off of McLeod." And I just stopped my car and I had tears. Tears because the Dogs were losing, but tears because of that line. And I contacted you on Monday and said, disappointing about the Dogs, but Dwayne, there'll never be a better line. Fantastic.
Look, there's another line, obviously, from a song, and
Yeah,
I'm a big Rolling Stones fan as well. You need the scenario to happen though for that
you do.
to come out. Look, and I've worked with the great Dennis committee for a long time as well, and Dennis was fantastic at that kind of stuff. So I've learned from the greatest, and I'll never be as good as Dennis committee, but I think there is a want from me, having worked with Ted Whitten, EJ Whitten, worked with Dennis committee, worked with Eddie Maguire, some of the great showmen of broadcasting. Yes. There is, I think, people are tuning in for a show that you can't make yourself ever bigger than the players or the live action that's happening. But, people are tuning in for an enjoyable afternoon of entertainment. So, I've seen some of the great entertainers broadcast, and it's been nice to be able to work with those guys.
Are there a couple that stand out?
Well, Dennis for me. Yeah, having worked with Dennis and doing Sunday footy with him and Dermot, going up to do the Swans games at the SCG every second week together. He always was a very infectious, giving broadcaster to work with. And I think that I've sort of learned a little bit from all of them. I've learned a bit from Eddie, because he could rev something up like no one else has ever been able to rev it up, Eddie. And that's the beauty of Eddie's broadcasting as well. When you tune into when Eddie used to broadcast, you felt like it was a show. You felt like, okay, this is the big stage I'm watching now. And there's a big part of that as well, I think, in the way that the modern game is broadcast, not just the way I broadcast. EJ was a showman, had an infectious way of going about it as well. So there's probably a little bit of all of them. I mean, there's even, going back to a guy who tutored us, Peter Booth at the ABC.
Yeah, one of the greats.
There's a lot of that sort of understated way of actually broadcasting where, you just be a really good number two, which I think I have been over time. I've been a number two to EJ, I've been a number two to Eddie, I've been a number two to Dennis committee. And I think there's an art to being a really good number two. And I think that's something I learned with Peter Booth at the ABC as well. There's a role to play when you're working with the big bopper.
And you worked with Tim Lane as well. You're at the ABC.
Exactly.
You're at the ABC for a while. What did you learn about broadcasting working at the ABC, being one of the few ex-sports people who worked there and obviously developed his craft nicely and learned a number of sports? I always remember you did the hockey, and Dwayne would drop you off. We're in the bus. Yeah. We meant to go to the IBC, but Dwayne used to get dropped off at the hockey centre, and the rest of us would go on to the IBC, and you did a magnificent job. Of course, the women won the gold medal, so that was a huge highlight, no doubt.
Yeah, it was. Broadcasting the Olympics, doing the equestrian at the London Games, doing the speed skating in Vancouver for the Winter Games have been sort of big moments where a lot of that ABC tuition has been great for me. I mean, the ABC was about accuracy, doing your research, getting the names right,
yes,
getting the pronunciation correct.
Yes.
Don't get a name wrong or incorrect pronunciation or get terminology wrong, because people instantly know, well, he doesn't know much about this sport. He doesn't even understand what that term meant or how to explain it or how to phrase it. So there was a lot of that with the ABC about accuracy, and I think that's something that I took from the ABC. And the interesting part about the ABC was, it was about just giving a very good, accurate broadcast that told exactly to the people out there what was happening without going over the top. And then I went and worked with 3AW and worked with Channel 9. And that's when the sales and the showman element comes into it. You realise that, okay, if people aren't listening to this at AW, if people aren't tuning in and enjoying what you're doing, then you're out of a job. At the ABC, it was all about being accurate, and whatever happened in a way. Whereas at 3AW, you don't rate, you're out. Channel 9 looks at the numbers at the end of a broadcast to say, how did we do on Friday night? Okay, well, maybe they don't enjoy Dwayne Russell's commentary so much. Better get someone else in. So It wasn't until I left the ABC and went to AW and had the 5 years at Channel 9, and obviously now I'm at Fox, that I understood that there's a bigger picture out there, and that people need to be tuning in. And if they're not tuning into you or enjoying what you're doing, then there's an element to getting cut pretty quickly.
True or myth, Dwayne? You fell into broadcasting.
Um, well, fell is probably a good description, because in 1989, I think I played the first 11 games for Geelong in '89, and then I did my knee. And I was part of their starting 18 pretty much every week in '89, and then did my knee. Wasn't available for the '89 grand final, the famous Hawthorn Geelong grand final. And the Cats asked me to do all the media. Could I give the players a chop out and go and do all the radio and TV? I'd done a bit of radio and TV before, so they knew that I would enjoy it. Would I write for the Geelong Advertiser? Would I write an article for the Sunday Age? And year 12, I was pretty good at writing in year 12. And that's the thing that got me through year 12 at school, to be honest. It was not just sport, it was English. I was good at English. So I enjoyed the opportunity to write for the Geelong Advertiser, enjoyed the opportunity to write for the Sunday Age during that '89 final series about Geelong. And, went into a few radio studios and thought, I can do this. This is fun. This is good. I can actually do this job. And that led to getting an opportunity full time at K-Rock and Bay FM, because that's where I'd done a bit of stuff during the '89 finals. And that led to me applying for the journalism traineeship at the ABC and getting 5 years at the ABC. So and I got the call up for Magic 693 as well, Dan, which
Yes.
there's a lot of people that open doors for you. And Smokey Dawson, there's a lot of people over time that have opened doors for me and helped me out. So the opportunity was there for me to do some media, and some people opened some doors for me. So if I wasn't injured in '89, maybe I wouldn't be doing it.
Oh, I think somehow you would have found a way. I mean, you've done a great job over the years with the calling of the footy. Did you have to do some work on that, or were you just asked to call one day? And obviously, with your footy background experience, you're able to do it quite comfortably.
Well, I was thrown into the deep end a bit at K-Rock, but the interesting part about I went to the interview at Bay FM and K-Rock to actually get a job there, and I was doing the news reading, the sport news reading job when I first went there, and doing breakfast radio and interviewing EJ every day for breakfast on as part of the breakfast crew. But initially, to get that job, strangely enough, Mark Beretta, who's the superstar in the media,
Yeah.
Shane Heal for a while, who was the gun Supercats basketballer back in those days. We used to be the guys in the giveaway truck. We'd go down the coast and
Right.
packets of chips and sun cream and all that kind of stuff and give it away to people. We were doing the summer giveaways, Mark Beretta and I. So we were doing that early job. And one of the interviews that I did when I went into the office, and they said, okay, well, you've got to be able to talk. You've got a minute. See the silo out the window, and there was some silos outside the window of the Bay FM office. And the boss said, I want you to talk about those silos for 2 minutes. Away you go. Start now. And I had to do 2 minutes of explanation of what the silos looked like, and just come up with, okay, well, the colour's white and there's a bit of shade on one side, but they look scorching hot on the other side. There's a bit of a reflection of the cars going past in them, beneath them, that kind of stuff. And that was one of the interview processes. So the whole learning process was a fun part to me through the media time as well. There was all these little learning bits and pieces where I got an understanding of what it took. So I was sort of thrown into the deep end a bit, but I think they're almost thrown into the deep end more, the players who are coming out of football now, getting media jobs. It's not like they do a 5-year traineeship at the ABC.
But I mean, what they get though is they get a lot of exposure, and if they're good enough, like Jordan Lewis and Jack Revolt were on the Players' Night on 360, if they're good enough, they'll come back, and then that there's a media career waiting for them.
Yeah, and look, with the ABC, as Peter Booth used to send us out to the Junction Oval.
Yeah, to do the cricket.
Would be go to the Junction Oval, take a tape recorder.
Yes.
call an hour of cricket from behind the bowler's arm, and have a second 11 game, bring it back, and I'll critique it when you get back here at 3. So we would do that quite often, Dan.
We would.
Make you go and do bowls, or not make you, but ask you to go and do it, and then come back and say, yeah, not enough light and shade. You weren't excited enough in this moment. Too deadpan, too boring, too over the top. You screamed at that moment, crazy stuff. You don't scream. So, those kind of things were taught to you at the ABC that were invaluable.
Do you think young people are in too much of a hurry to get to the top nowadays?
Well, there's a lot of young people who do internships and, don't get much pay for it. So I think they're doing it. I was in a rush too. I think everyone's in a rush. No, I think the young people today have got an understanding of what's required quicker. So maybe they are acquiring the skills because they've been through the schooling of it quicker. So they're probably at a point where they believe that they're ready for the next run on the ladder. But again, it just takes someone to open the door for you. So maybe there's just more young people trying to kick the door down now than there ever has been, because it is a pretty sought after industry to get into.
And you're right too. There's lots of opportunities. You can be a producer. You can work in social media. You don't have to be on air. You can have as much success being off air by actually setting up shows with all the producers at SEN and other stations, talk stations, whether it be sport or news. Dwayne Russell is my guest. He's written a magnificent book called Killing for Sport. In the words of Ian Molly Meldrum, he's showing the T-shirt now. Do yourself a favour. It's got Dwayne's World in the background as well. He's wonderful show. He has 2 hours of midday madness. You can see why they call it midday madness. Some of the maddest, craziest people call up all the time, and Dwayne handles them beautifully. And we're here for Dashing Dan Sporting Adventures and KISS Professional Solutions, and their website is www.kissps.com.au, the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria. People often forget, Dwayne, what a very good footballer you were. You're a North Adelaide supporter, so you loved the late, great Barry Robran, but you're in the Port Adelaide recruiting zone. You went there as a 17-year-old. You were there in the early 80s when they were winning premierships. If my memory serves me right, you might have missed out on a premiership, unlike most people in those days. You played in the 84 granny when you were red-hot favourite, and Norwood came from 5th to beat you, and you were vice-captain at 21. So it achieved a lot. Tell us about your Port Adelaide days and playing with arguably the second best player of that era in the sample in the great Russell Ebert.
Well, my first game in a Port Adelaide jumper was in the Little League, or the Mini League as it was called back then, because my school was in the Port Adelaide zone. So there was that. And then I got the invite from Paraka, where I was playing, and I lived to play in Port Adelaide's under 13s, then under 15s, and then under 17s, and under 19s, and then reserves, and then seniors. So, I was pretty much playing for Port Adelaide all the way through, even though my father and my grandfather both played for North Adelaide.
Right.
And, when I was young, we would go and watch North Adelaide play all the time. We'd go and watch every week. So that's why, I was a North Adelaide fan, because my grandfather played there and my father played there for a short time before he ended up playing for Kilburn and Paraka. So, Port Adelaide, once you went to Port, I still remember the moment I first went there. The first day, I know who picked me up. I know what it was like on arrival. I know the song that was playing on the cassette player at the time when I arrived at Albert. And that's how much I remember this day. And I walked in and I thought, wow, this place has got an aura. I want to be here. And I'd spent a lot of time at Prospect Oval, but
yes,
there's just something unbelievable about Albert now. Maybe it's the success rate, but it had an amazing aura. And once I walked into that place that day, I knew this was the club for me. It was Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell, by the way. It was playing on the cassette.
You knew I was going to ask you that, didn't you? You knew that.
So, it was a day that I won't forget, because from that moment on, I was Port Adelaide.
You were unlucky that you didn't play in a premiership. They won a flag in 81. You were 17. Were you just a bit young then?
Yeah, I played maybe, how many games did I play in 81? Only 2 or 3 games in 81. Yeah. I got one of them maybe by default. My first ever game was, I think, there was a state game. And I think Port Adelaide had 7 representatives in the
Yes.
state game, but there were 7 guys unavailable that weekend. So I got the call up. I stayed in the team for a few weeks, but then I didn't get a game in the finals. Yeah, so yeah, probably too young, but you never think you're too young. You always think you're good enough to get in. And then you mentioned 1984 when I was vice captain and Barmy was coaching Norwood, and they beat us in the grand final. We, I think, finished top, and they'd finished 5th, as you mentioned. So yeah, that was a hard one to get over. I don't think I'll ever get over that one. But that's the way it is. I came to Geelong, and I wanted to have a go at a VFL career as it was then, before it turned into the AFL in 1990. That was one thing that I always wanted to do. So I came over and had a crack. And a good friend of mine, George Fiacci, who took over the number 4 that I wore at Port Adelaide, played in 7 premierships in it. So yeah, I could have played in a few, but that's okay. It's been great to have had that chance. If I didn't ever go to Geelong, I think I would have regretted never having a crack at the VFL. I always wanted to see, whether I was any good.
Was it always Geelong, or were other clubs chasing you as well? You're a pretty good player in South Australia, Dwayne.
Yeah, it was Collingwood. There was a game, there was a night game when Escort Cup, as it was back then, and I kicked 7 goals on Peter Knight. It was Port Hawthorn. And that got me into the eyes of a lot of recruiters. Poor old Knightsy was getting on in age, and he was coming back from injury that night. Thought he'd have a nice, easily run around at Football Park and get his fitness back. But I saw it as an opportunity to make a statement. So I think Derm kicked 7 down the other end for Hawthorn in that night game. We were both at the same age. And they won by a goal, I think. Hawthorn beat us, knocked us out. But it was one of those games that was just great to watch. I think every footy fan used to love those Wednesday night games. And this was, me kicking 7 at one, Dermot kicking 7 at the other, a 1-goal thriller. It was one of those games that, okay, who's this team? Port Adelaide, who are these guys playing for them? So I got a couple of phone calls. Collingwood obviously were interested for a while and then dropped their interest from me to Michael Christian and Craig Starcevich. Yeah. And then Geelong gave me a call and said, we know you'd come to an arrangement to play for Collingwood, but we'd love you to come and play for us. And they virtually knew what I was being offered at Collingwood, and they said, whatever they've offered, we'll match. And come and have a look at our town. So I came to Geelong, and it was just I thought this is a nice place to go to. So yeah, I packed my bags and over I came, and they thought I would rent a house in Geelong when I arrived, because most interstate recruits sort of came over and saw what it was like and rented for a while. And they'd signed me on a 3-year deal, but in those days they could cut you like that and you were gone, because there was no Players Association. Even though you had a 3-year deal, if they didn't put you on the list each year, you didn't make the list of 50, then your contract was null and void. My contract was that I had to make the list of 50 to get paid. So I didn't rent a house. I bought one. I came over.
A house.
And I bought a unit in town because I was planning to stay. And they said, "Did you just buy a house last week here? I've only been here a couple of months." I said, "Well, I'm not going home." So that was sort of they were a bit stunned by that. I think that maybe it was just my confidence in myself, or my want to make it, almost as if I'm committed here now. There's no going home. So yeah, it was a great thing going to Geelong. It's been great for me too, and I still live here, obviously.
You had 2 years under John Devine. Gary Ablett was at his best.
Yeah.
You had a front row seat. Why was he so good, and was he better than Ebert? Was he better than Robin? And I know you saw Robin as a kid, so you had a different view of him, didn't you?
I did. Look, because I knew Russell Ebert, and because he was my coach for a few, or captain coach, as it was. He was my captain. So Brian Cunningham was the captain when I first started playing at Port under John Cale. And then Russell became captain coach in essence, and captain. And there was just a beauty to Russell as a craftsman footballer. Some of these guys just see what's unfolding 2 or 3 seconds before everybody else. So they can get in position before everybody else, and they get the ball because of that. And Russell was like that. But I think if I had a conversation with Russell as to how did you do that, or how did that happen, he would be able to explain it. Whereas Gaz was just instinct. It was just, you'd ask him, how you do that? Well, it's just what I do. It's just how I play. It's just How did you know that the ball was gonna go there, or how did you know that the pack of five had run a bit too much under it and it was going to carry to you at the back? How did you see that? And there was the Gazza instinct ability was something like I'd never seen before, and I don't think I'll ever see again because players are coached more than ever. They've got game plans and game styles and individual areas they have to stay in and run to. And I think the junior level, the instinct's being coached out of a lot of kids as well because they're trying to win games and has structured game plans. So I'd never seen anything like it with Gazza. And I was also changing in the locker next to him. He was number 5 and I was 6. So I got to have a lot of conversations with him, outside of what was happening on the track. So yeah, it was just a delight to play with Gazza for 5 years. Well, it really was only 4.5 years because he retired. He went into retirement for half a season, and that was a surprise to all of us. And then came out of retirement, and it was good to have him back.
Different cat, wasn't he, Dwayne? That's an understatement, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think that's the other thing I learned from Geelong, and that is everyone's different. There were a lot of different characters at Geelong. Steve Hocking was a non-drinker, and I come from Port Adelaide was pretty much everyone got together after the game and had a beer.
Yeah.
And it was compulsory. So a Sunday morning to have a beer together. We'd train on a Sunday morning and then all go back into the club and have a beer on a Sunday morning. It was almost compulsory. Whereas, I got to Geelong and there's players who wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or that had, more important things than football. And Steve Hocking was a non-drinker and, a thinker about the game. And I got to, get an understanding of that side of things as well. And there are guys who were, training as almost full-time professionals as well, didn't have day jobs. And I was one of those when I first came over that thought, okay, that's what I want to be as well. And, there was guys like Gazza who came at football from a different angle. So, it was nice to get that understanding, a broader understanding of the world at Geelong, because I was a kid at Port Adelaide. I was, very young and trying to work out what was going on in the world, but I didn't really know that there was much. I hadn't really seen the world beyond Port.
How much did Malcolm Blight change the club? And even within the playing group, were you surprised how quickly he became a great side? You're a magnificently attacking team that kicked more points than probably anyone else in the history of the game.
Yeah.
He just turned the club around very quickly, even though you were pretty competitive under John Devine in your first 2 years at the club.
We had a good team under John Devine. I mean, when you think about it, Ablett, Brownless, Stoneham, Lindner, Hocking in the back line with a number of Mark Boss, who was a great state player.
Great player.
Michael Turner on a wing. I mean, Neville Bruns, good ball getters.
Yates.
Yes, exactly. It was a good team under John Devine, but John Devine was more a motivator. He'd rev you up at the start of every game and send you out there breathing fire, hoping that you'd just play on instinct and you'd be able to win this game through pure desire. Blighty came along and he had game plans and he had, this is what we're going to do with this situation. And he had scenario training, and this was all new to us, when Blighty came around, that we've got a plan here for a kick in. Really? We're not just going to kick it to the guy that the fullback sees might be the freest, or the guy the fullback decides at the time is the right guy to kick it to. We're actually going to have a plan from a kick in. So it might sound crazy to people watching the game or playing the game now, that there was an era where there was no plan from a kick in. You just left it up to your fullback to make the choice. But Blighty came in with plans, and he had a lot of little things as well that were idiosyncrasies that made you think about it. Where you tied your boot, if you tied it on the top of your boot with a knot and a bow, when the ball hit the top of your boot for a drop punt, could the knot and the bow affect how the ball comes off your boot? So one minute point that instead of being a goal, it's going to hit the post. So tie your boots at the side. So there's little things like that he'd say, and you'd think, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Tie my boots at the side, because it might be the thing that actually puts the ball into the post and makes you offline by a millimetre. So there was a lot of things that Blighty came along with. He also had the aura. When he walked into the place, he was an achiever. He'd achieved so much as a player. And as a personality, he was a character and an extrovert as well. So he brought so many different weapons to the table for us all that it was no surprise that he got some improvement out of everybody.
You touched on your knee that you suffered in 1989 earlier on and Dashing Down Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions. Wonderful to have Dwayne Russell with us. Do you think if you don't do your knee, Dwayne, you have a longer career? Because you did tell the story that you said you're ready to play, and Blighty said, "Yeah, Dwayne, we've got the MCG. What do you think there might be an issue with you?" Was that a bit unfair? Because I remember you could certainly play, big, strong body. I mean, you might have been the quickest player out there, but I would have thought there was a role for you in that team.
Yeah, well, I came over to Melbourne playing the VFL. I'm 6'1",
Mm.
so I was a centre half forward for Port Adelaide. Played a bit in the middle as well. We had really good midfielders at Port, like Russell Ebert and Stephen Clifford, and Braddles. So I was never going to get a game in the middle at Port Adelaide, but I knew I could get a game at centre half forward. So I sort of made myself into a centre half forward at that time because I'd always played midfield as a kid because I was tall and big, but also fit and agile. And then I came to the VFL on 6'1". You were playing against guys that were 6'3", 6'4", that were just as skilled as you, if not better. So that was a hard transition for a centre half forward to come and play on bigger centre half backs who were really good. And in the Sandful as well, the good players were really good. Stephen Kernahan, Platten, Bradley, Motley. Every team had, every team had some superstar players. Kernahan, I'd just go through the whole lot. McDermott. So but it dropped off, I think, fairly quickly. And I think that's where we see SA was always competitive against the VFL or beat the VFL in state games because the best 40 players that the Sandful had were as good as the best 40 players in the VFL. But my own opinion is from that, it dropped off fairly dramatically. So you'd get the weeks in the Sandful where you could tear someone apart. You'd get games in the Sandful where Port Adelaide was just too damn good in the end because, the 13th, 14th, 15th guy picked in that team just weren't able to keep up with Port Adelaide's ability to be able to move the ball with the star factor that they've got and the aggression and want that they had. Whereas I came to the VFL and I think the depth was a lot better. There wasn't a lot of easy weeks. You'd play against a bottom team like St Kilda, but Danny Frawley was their fullback or centre half back. So you'd be playing on Spud. So there were a lot of players that were, making it a lot harder for me to be a good player back then. Would I have been better if I didn't have, and I've had 11 knee ops now.
11?
I'd had a few, and one of them was a posterior cruciate reattachment that didn't work. So I was in the last 2 years of my career without a posterior cruciate, and my knee was really wobbly. So I couldn't jump. I couldn't get the traction for sprint as much as I could. But I would say that everybody's like that. Everyone's got something that goes wrong, an injury here or some guys didn't have the capacity to train hard or didn't want to, so they went home. They'd be superstars in the country, but I'm not going to train 4 days a week. I'm not going to commit to this kind of lifestyle in the big city. So, I had I think the mental capacity to do it, but the fact that my body let me down in the end is just like pretty much everybody else. We all get brought down by something, and I'm just happy that I had some time in the sun. It didn't let me down too much too early. It let me have 5 years in the AFL, VFL before it completely packed up. And when your time's up, your time's up. You're no good complaining about the powers that be didn't give me good enough knees. That's still happening now. So nothing's different in the world of sport. Sometimes your body lets you down. You got to get over it.
You had 5 more than most people. You did some coaching, Colac, that was in the Hampden League, down the Geelong League, and half a year at Sebastopol in the Ballarat League. Did you like coaching, or did you realise pretty early on maybe this isn't for me?
So a bit like playing, where I thought I was going to be the greatest player of all time, I thought, I'm going to be a great coach. But you really do have to get involved in the lives of 50 people at a country club. Not just the players, but the reserves and the administrators and the president and the water people and the boot starters and all those people who are giving their heart and soul and their time voluntarily. So I got a quick understanding that coaching wasn't just coaching. It was man and women management across the board for all those people involved. You were there to, pretty much be involved in their lives and channel the football club in a direction. So, my man management wasn't my forte. Man management is not a skill set that I've got. That's why I'm not man managing now. I haven't gone into business and I don't have people working under me because I know that you really do have to get involved so deeply in coaching these days to care and know what a player's mum's name is and what their dog's name is and understand that, when I was at Colac, for example, some of these guys are working their backside off 7 till 6 as a plumber and they can't get the training and have 100 shots at goal before training to refine their craft. So I got there with this idea that, okay, well, if your kicking's not good enough as a full forward, we'll just get the training an hour earlier and we'll really work on it. But a lot of them were tradies who couldn't do that. So it was a bit of an eye-opener to me. And I had the media doors opening for me at that time as well.
Yes.
So that's where I kind of had to make a choice. But the choice was made for me, I think. I don't think I was as good at... I was a good captain and coach because when I could play well, then I could just set the example. But in a day where I wasn't playing well and I didn't want to stick around, at the bar till midnight, chatting to the people and doing the things that you need to do at a country club and have an understanding that there's a deeper involvement here. Media pretty much became my avenue pretty quickly after that.
You're very honest about that because, and I'm sure you've heard about, there were a few people, particularly at Colac, I know well because I worked there, who said that was an area of Dwayne as a coach that he did battle with. But I mean, you've always been seen as an honest person, Dwayne. Do you see that as one of your great characteristics?
Well, a man's got to know his limitations is another quote from Clint Eastwood. I think I think you do have to understand what you're good at and what you're not good at, and understand that. I think life's a bit about specialisation. If you can find the thing you're good at, whether you're young or old or a kid or a male, female, whatever, find the thing that you're good at, but find the thing that you really love as well. Then go in that direction and try and be as good at it as possible. So that's probably where I kind of got an understanding that coaching wasn't what I was going to be good at long term, but I could be good at something in the media. So that's why. As soon as that door opened, I went through that door, pretty quickly. So there were a lot of people, as I said, opening doors back in those days. Ian Major was another one that opened the door for me.
One of the greats. Yep.
Yeah. So, there's a few people that were saying, okay, well, here's a job for you. If you're any good, you'll be in it long term. If you're no good, you'll last 2 weeks. So, that was what coaching was like as well. If you're any good, you might last in it forever. But if you're no good, you'll last 2 seasons like I did.
2 more, and I really appreciate your time. I've probably kept you over time for KISS Professional Solutions, and we're here to promote. And we have been talking a lot about Dwayne's great novel, Killing for Sport. He's just shown that T-shirt again. Mine's in the mail, Dwayne, I believe. So we'll see what happens down the track. If someone said to you when you were playing league footy in the late 80s, early 90s, that you would have the media career you've had nearly 35 years later, what would you have said to them?
I might have said that, yes, of course I'm going to be in the media because I'll be a 3-time Brownlow medalist. I would have played in 2 or 3 Geelong flags because I believe that the world was going to be my oyster because I was going to be a good footballer. So the hard part is you never quite know what life's going to throw at you. But that was probably my aspiration back then to be as good a footballer as possible and see what doors open. So I was doing a little bit of TV for Port Adelaide back then as well, and a little bit of their media stuff, even though I was 21. And I was good at English at school. So it was always that. I applied straight out of school as an 18-year-old to do a journalism traineeship at the Adelaide Advertiser. Yeah. So I always wanted to get into journalism straight out of school. And I had really good English teachers who were encouraging. They thought I could write well. Some of my stories and my analysis of books that I'd read was good. And they gave me a lot of praise in that. So I applied to be a journalist at the Adelaide Advertiser and didn't get in. So, there was that thought that I could go back to that one day. So if you'd have said to me as an 18, 19-year-old, I'll get into journalism one day, then maybe I would have actually thought that was somewhere I would end up.
And Geelong or Port Adelaide or neither? Because I know on Dwayne's World on
Yeah.
Midday Madness, they said, Dwayne, what would you know? You're a Geelong supporter. What would you know? You're biased towards Port Adelaide. Or is that a load of rubbish?
Well, Geelong's, to be honest, if you're asking me whether I'd barracking for Geelong to win the flag next year, to be honest, Geelong's sort of won enough flags for now. I don't ever want Geelong or Port Adelaide not to be competitive. I like seeing them at the high end of the ladder and, being good teams and being great clubs because they were such a big part of my life and such an important part of my life. I don't want them to be ridiculed. I don't want them to be, I hated it when Port Adelaide had tarps on the seats and that wasn't the club that I grew up with. That wasn't what I wanted them to be looked at as. But, I'm a big boy now. Geelong's a behemoth. And if they don't win another flag for 10, 15 years because St Kilda's won one and because Fremantle's won one, that's a good thing for footy. And I want footy as a national game to be vibrant. So, I'm pretty excited about the fact that Geelong's established itself and has become a club that does finish, in the top 8 most years. But, in terms of do I want them to win another flag or am I barracking for them to win the flag? Nah, let's let St Kilda or Fremantle or one of the other teams that haven't had a spotlight for a while win one.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Now, and the Bulldogs, of course, have only won one.
Yeah, the Dogs. 2016, Dan, hasn't been that long a drought.
No, it'd be nice to win another one, and they've got a good enough team to do it, but they drive me mad, as you know, Dwayne. When I used to broadcast, I think that everyone knew, Dan's on the edge of his seat today, would drive everyone mad, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. Now, how much does it cost for the book? Because my brother bought one for me, and I didn't ask him how much it cost.
Well, I think QBD Books are selling it for so you can get it you can buy it off Amazon if you want to get it online. You can buy the audio book as well. So just Google Killing for Sport.
Thanks, Dwayne, so much for joining us on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions. Wonderful to catch up with Dwayne, who I worked with a long time ago at the ABC. Great broadcaster, as we discussed a lot in that podcast. But of course, we're also there to talk about his journey of writing a novel, and what a great novel that is. Loved every single minute of that. It's called Killing for Sport. And if you're looking for a Christmas present and also a birthday present, you can't go past Killing for Sport. And you can get it at a number of bookshops. QBD for $26.99, Big W for $18, Amazon for $26.25, Collins for $34. There's an audio version, as Dwayne mentioned, for $21.99. And you can also go directly to the publisher, Simon & Schuster, as well, to get a copy of this magnificent book, Killing for Sport. I did say at the start of the podcast, having read the book, couldn't put it down. I believe there is a sequel. And Dwayne also talked about a movie. How good would that be? Some wonderful characters in that book. And what a career Dwayne's had, and will continue, of course, with his show in 2026 on SEN, Dwayne's World, and also with plenty of football in another big year in the AFL of 2026. Again, thanks to John McEncroe and the crew at KISS Professional Solutions. They're based here in Melbourne, but they have offices in Sydney and also throughout New South Wales, Albury, which deals with offices in Wagga as well. And of course, Carrum Downs is the office in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. Merry Christmas to everyone, and we'll have more Dashing Dan sporting adventures for KISS Professional Solutions in 2026.